What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? It is Eric Go, otherwise known as Oh No, It's Eric Go, with another video. And today we are going to be answering some frequently asked questions about dual Filipino and American citizenship. So I kind of want this video to give the whole picture, or kind of answer not only some of the travel and logistics related questions, but kind of just give the entire picture of what it is like to be a dual Filipino and American citizen. So let's actually get started with how I got my Philippine citizenship. And it was actually not too long ago, so I'm relatively new in terms of being a Filipino citizen. Quick background: born and raised in New York, so I was, an American citizen from the get-go. However, my parents were actually green card holders at the time of my birth. So that's actually one of the ways, or kind of one of the loopholes that I used in order to get Philippine citizenship. Typically, in order for you to get Philippine citizenship, your parents would bring you to the embassy and say, hey, this is my son or this is my daughter, and you would be able to get citizenship that way. However, I didn't get my Philippine citizenship until I was 25 years old. I was no longer a minor. A couple of things that I needed from the get-go were documents proving that my parents were Philippine citizens at the time of my birth. I used their birth certificates showing that they were born in the Philippines, and I also used copies of their passport at the time. So back in 1991, when I was born, the passports that they were using were still Philippine passports, and of course they had those green cards in them. So that's how I was able to get the Philippine citizenship. There were also a couple of other documents that I needed to furnish because I was no longer a minor. What ended up happening was I had to produce some affidavits from not only my mother, but also from close friends that say, Eric is the son of so-and-so, and we guarantee, or rather we solemnly swear that he is in fact the son of my mom. Once that happened, I actually was given the option. So this is kind of the first frequently asked question that you guys might have. Do I go for the passport or do you go for the certificate? Now, it's completely up to you guys whether or not you want your citizenship to be in the form of the certificate or the passport. However, when I was given the option, I directly chose the passport. The reason why is because I think the passport is just a better form of identification. You can actually use it as a form of identification, whereas the certificate that shows you're a Philippine citizen can only be used to prove that you can stay for longer than 30 days in the Philippines. You can't use it to travel, you can't use it as ID, and that's kind of difficult. So when you're doing your banking in the Philippines, or rather if you're just flying in general, it's always good to have another photo identification. So let's get into why you should get Philippine citizenship to begin with. Of course, you guys might be wondering, why would I even bother to have this when you already have this, right? And it's a great question to ask. The reason why I personally got Philippine citizenship was, first of all, it was less than $200. And the way I thought of it was, well, if I could have another citizenship and another ID for less than 200 USD, why not? But the other reason why was because I've always wanted to work and live in Asia. And of course, if you have one of these, you can spend longer than the 30-day allotted time frame that they give to tourists or foreigners. So if you have a Philippine passport and you're a Philippine citizen, you can stay in the Philippines for as long as you want. That's just on kind of a dwelling situation. However, if you'd like to work, you also don't need a work permit. So there's no need to go apply for a temporary work permit and then get that approved into a permanent work permit. This passport serves as a perfect way to start working in the Philippines, given that someone accepts you for the job offer and you go through the job interview process and all that. And unlike some other expats that have to consistently leave the country, this Philippine passport allows me to stay for as long as I want and not have to worry about, okay, I need to leave and go to Macau or whatever country is closest and cheapest to fly to in order to get the passport stamp and kind of work here as an employee, but technically you're just a tourist. A couple of other things that are kind of cool are if you are looking to start your own business, you can start your own business as a Filipino citizen and not have to deal with any of the kind of dummy stakeholders and have to put someone else on your government documents, such as your BIR permit. You can own a business in your name without having any kind of drama or having any kind of other sketchy legalities involved where if there were to be a problem with your business and it's not in your name, then you are kind of out of luck. On that note, it's also important to realize that as a Philippine citizen, you can own a house and a lot. So right now, the rules here in the Philippines are you can own a condo for investment, so you can buy a condominium. However, if you are a foreign passport holder or a foreign citizen, you cannot own a house and lot. That goes back to the thing I told you before, where you would have to get someone else on your title or your deed. And you kind of want your property to be in your name, right? So having one of these is definitely a plus if you're looking to own land in the Philippines, either for business perspective, investment perspective. Perhaps you have some family members that you'd want to buy land for. That is also a good thing to have. So enough background on the actual dual Philippine American citizenship. I'm sure you guys clicked on this video because you want to know more about how to travel with these two passports and the benefits of having both of them. The first one is actually having the Philippine passport and the US passport means you don't have to pay for the Philippine Travel Tax, which is a tax that all Filipinos have to pay when traveling outside of the country. At the time of making this video, that travel tax is actually 1,620 pesos, which is roughly about 32 USD. Imagine having to pay 32 USD every single time you leave the country. Even if you leave for, a couple weekend trips, that's already $100 right there. Not to mention, if you actually have a Philippine passport, there are some places you can visit without a visa, whereas if you only had an American passport, you would have to apply for a visa there. An example of that is Vietnam. So if you have a US passport only, you would have to apply for a Vietnam e-visa prior to leaving for Vietnam. However, because Vietnam and the Philippines are both ASEAN nations, you can actually enter into Vietnam visa-free, no hassle at all, using your Philippine passport. That was actually a mistake that I made at one point in time, thinking that my mighty US passport could get me in anywhere, and I was questioned by passport control in Vietnam saying, "Where is my visa?" And I was very close to getting deported back until I whipped this passport out and I said, "Hey, actually, no, I'm not American." I stamped this passport and I was free to go. Another thing about passport control here in the Philippines is the long lines. Now, I'm sure you've seen it if you've traveled through the airport here in the Philippines before. There's a foreign line and a PH passport line. And those lines can be various lengths, from long to longer to the longest you've ever seen. Some of the longest lines I've ever seen here in NAIA were at least 200 people long. So it actually is beneficial to have both because you just pick the shorter line. It doesn't really matter. You can put whatever passport you want on top. If you end up in the Philippine line, they will entertain you with both of your passports. And of course, it's always nice to get through passport control quicker, especially after you've had a long flight. However, I think some of you guys might have questions on the logistics themselves. So for example, which passport do I use when entering and exiting the Philippines? Vice versa, which one do you use when entering and exiting the United States? Do I need to get stamps in both? So let's go over some of those questions now. The first one is, which passport do you present when entering the Philippines? Actually, you should present both of them. The reason why is you'd like to have a stamp in both. I know this from personal experience because the first time I actually entered into the Philippines, I was curious to see if my Philippine passport would work, so I tossed away my US one and only used the Philippine one to enter in. Of course, that was fine for entering into the Philippines because it looked like I was just a Philippine citizen returning home. However, when leaving the Philippines 2 weeks later to go back to America, I used this passport because, of course, you need a visa if you're using this one. When I used the American passport, passport control looked inside the pages to find an entry stamp, which they did not find. At which point I was questioned and they asked me, well, how did you get here? At that point, I apologized to Ate at Passport Control, and I said, oh, sorry, I actually have the stamp here. At that point in time, I was advised to always get a stamp in both passports. That way, when you enter in the Philippines, you have proof that you've entered in not only as an American citizen, but also as a Philippine citizen who can stay for longer than 30 days. But then when you exit the Philippines, you don't need to worry about this one because this one won't have a visa, and this is your ticket to get into America with no visa at all. But of course, when leaving the Philippines, always get a stamp in both as well. If you present both of these to Passport Control, there's absolutely no issue. They are more than well versed with this. Just make sure you kind of listen for the thud of two stamps. You can check it when you're done, when you're done with Passport Control, and be on your merry way. Now, once you've survived the long flight and you're back in New York or wherever it is that you are in America, your port of entry, you don't have to worry about presenting your Philippine passport. Quite frankly, America doesn't really care that you have a Philippine passport. As much as they accept dual citizenship, they don't really mind this. So in order to enter into America, of course, to get through Passport Control or immigration, you have to present your United States passport. So if you are using the global entry kiosk, just go ahead and scan your passport, or if you are using the traditional method, just hand this single passport over to Passport Control, and hopefully they tell you welcome home, just like in the movies. Some of you guys might be wondering if I use the e-gates to enter into the Philippines. If you guys aren't familiar with the e-gates, they were actually rolled out last year in NAIA Terminal 1, and I believe they also have them in Terminal 3 now. But what they are they're very similar to what you see around the world, but it's just a simple gate where you scan your boarding pass and your passport. It prints out a sticker that you then stick inside your passport, and you can either go to baggage claim or straight out to the curb. The reason why I don't use the e-gates are two things. One, they don't always work with Philippine passports. So they don't always work with all Philippine passports. These Philippine passports are known to be questionable when it comes to reading or being read through RFID gates. I've seen it in Hong Kong, and I've also seen it in the Philippines, where even new Philippine passports have issues getting scanned by those gates. Number two is not all boarding passes actually work with those e-gates as well. So it's kind of a hassle if you're there and if your passport isn't working or your boarding pass isn't working and you kind of have to fumble through the gate, someone has to help you along, and then you end up having to wait in line anyway. And at the time that this video was created, the e-gates don't actually support dual passports. The last time I was flying through NAIA Terminal 1, I actually asked a gentleman there if I could use that since there was actually no line at the e-gates and I wanted to give it a try. And he said, sir, if you're looking to get 2 passport stamps, we recommend that you just fall in line the traditional way. So as of April 2020, I am still using the traditional lines to get 2 passport stamps when I enter into Ninoy Aquino International Airport. I think another thing to note about getting a stamp in the US passport and the Philippine passport is just having proof that you've entered into the country and you've entered into the country legally. As far-fetched as this is, if there were to be political turmoil in the Philippines and you would seek refuge at the US Embassy, it would be very, very helpful to have proof that you've entered into this country legally. And that proof would come in the form of a passport stamp. Now, while this has identification, or this serves as identification that you are a US citizen, it would always be helpful to show when you started living or residing in this country. Just as a side note, for those dual Philippine American citizens out there, no matter where you end up in the world, if you are living abroad and not living in the United States, it's always helpful to sign up for the STEP program. Now, this is something that I just found out about a couple weeks ago due to the coronavirus pandemic, and what it is it's a program that allows the US government to know that you, as an American citizen, are residing outside of America, and you can choose where what country you're currently residing in. It also works for frequent travelers, and what it is it's basically an email newsletter from the embassy saying, if there's any kind of travel advisories, if there's any kind of issues with logistics. So, for example, here in Manila, the US Embassy was very quick to send out emails for repatriation flights, or rather the lack thereof, and encouraging US citizens to return home or to prepare to stay here indefinitely until the pandemic kind of subsides. I'll put a link in the description below on how you can sign up for the STEP program. It's completely free. It's perfect for frequent travelers or for people like me who are American citizens living abroad. And it's super helpful just to stay kind of in the know or keep yourself in the loop. So I hope this video gave you guys a quick crash course on dual Philippine and American citizenship and what to do when you have two of these passports and how to use them to their fullest extent. Now, if there are questions that weren't answered in this video, I highly encourage you guys to just throw a comment down below and I will get back to it ASAP. And if there are enough of the same question, I'll go ahead and do another video kind of just aiming at that specific inquiry that you guys might have. As always, don't forget to follow me on Instagram for more daily adventures of a native New Yorker living here in Manila. My Instagram is at ohnoitsericgo, and I will throw a link in the description so that way you guys can hit that follow button. Also, I will post a link to my new blog that I actually just launched about a month ago. It's goericgo.com, and I'll also be outlining some of my travels there as well as some of the pros and cons of having these two passports. Again, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Take care and see you in the next one.